America in Therapy Part 2 with psychotherapist Phyllis Leavitt. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact dependent. Hi, everyone. This is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator working throughout Florida and Texas. And today on the podcast, I again have my guest from a couple weeks ago, Phyllis Leavitt. She's a psychotherapist who has written a book called America in Therapy. And Philip, it's good to see you again. How are you doing today?
I'm good, really good. Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to see you.
Yes, thank you so much. And of course, I'm going to have your website up on the screen. Folks who are listening to this can check out her website, phyllisleavitt.com. That's PHYLLISLEAVITT.com, phyllisleavitt.com, author and psychotherapist. And so Philip has written a book that we went through last time called America in Therapy. And the subtitle is A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. And it was a good talk last time. So I encourage you to check out this resource from a few weeks back so you can hear the first part of our conversation. But at this point, we want to bring her back to continue our discussion. And coincidentally or incidentally, today happens to be the day after Election Day. And the US just went through a major election. Politics is a form of religion in this country, it seems. And late last night, Donald Trump got reelected. And a lot of questions are going to be asked by the pundits and the media, and folks are going to be talking about this. But the reason it's kind of important, connected to our talk today, Phyllis, is because the election itself and the consequences that will come from it, connect to a subject of your book, and that is Americans are like a patient. They're polarized. They have strife amongst, in between one another, and there's just lack of peace. I saw some recent research that said the other day, people were just anxious about this election. They were just, people were pulling out their hair, not knowing what's going to happen, and a lot of our identities are tied to these political systems now. And so, just wanted to have you back to continue the conversation and talk more about it and get more of your thoughts, and then hopefully close with some tips you might have
Mhm.
for the new president, on how he can be better as well, because we can all be better to make sure that we have a better prosperous country. But Phyllis, the floor is yours. Let me give you a couple minutes to just go through the main thesis of your book again, and then I'd like to come back with some Q&A.
Yeah, I think the main thesis of my book, and thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's really a pleasure to be here and continue this conversation that seems to me to be so important, because the main thesis of my book, in a way, is that our collective and individual mental health is really the big missing piece in politics and in our society and culture and the way we formulate how we relate to each other today. And so things have become so political, and I think we've forgotten to look through the lens of what's actually mentally healthy and what's not. And the basis for looking at that is, what happens in a healthy family and what happens in an unhealthy or an abusive family, and how can we understand our country and what to do with where we are, based in some of that sort of bedrock fundamental psychological understanding. Um, And one of the things that you brought up is, the strife in the country and the divisiveness. And we know that in our homes, that causes a lot of pain and dysfunction when people aren't able to work out their differences or find some resolution or come to some agreement about how they're going to run things or how they're going to treat each other. It causes a lot of pain and stress. And I think we've been suffering from that as a country. And so one of the reasons why I wrote my book is, what have we learned from the field of psychology that could help bring us back together to actually try to work out our differences rather than struggle for who's going to win and who's going to lose in every conversation.
Mhm. Well, tell us then about winning and losing.
Yeah.
Last time you discussed how that's one of the main problems that underlies all of this. So, can you explain to us the zero sum game or the win versus lose mentality that many people have and why it's such a problem?
Yeah, and I think we all want to win. We all want to get our way. We all want to have things be the way we want them, or have people come around and agree with us and see that we're right and they're wrong. But they want the same thing. And so, as human beings, we're never going to always agree. But we've been living under, I think, for centuries and centuries, maybe eons, under this win-lose paradigm. Somebody has to win, and therefore somebody has to lose. And while that's going to be true in football, or that's going to even be true in an election, I think we have to look together at the fallout if we're just living in a win-lose paradigm, as opposed to where I think the human race is trying to go, maybe with a lot of bumps in the road, is a win-win paradigm. So if we just look and we take the basis of good psychology, um, let's just say a couple comes to therapy, they each want to win the argument. They want the other person to see that they're right and change their behavior, and the other person wants the same thing. And it can end up in a huge tug of war. And when you're talking about a nation or different populations in a nation or different parties in a nation, it can literally end up in war, if not a lot of, just a lot of anger and pain and acting out on one another. And so in the basis of really good psychology is that we sit down and we really try to help people and direct people and teach them skills and tools for deep listening and trying to really understand each other, where each other is coming from, what pain may be driving their anger or their hurt, what they actually need, and to really listen deeply. And I always say it the same way, to listen deeply the way we want to be heard and to talk the way we want to be spoken to. And if we could just begin to use that, just that, as a model for how we work out our differences as a country or within different parties or different economic and social groups, we'd be a long way toward getting along with each other. Because what we see in the world of psychology is when people actually have some help to create that deep listening of one another, they're much more likely to begin to develop some kind of understanding and compassion for one another and be much more willing to reach agreement. And sometimes it's as simple as, oh, I really hear where you're coming from. When you're not attacking me and you're just telling me what it is you feel and what you need and where that comes from in you, I might just be like, oh, okay, or not. Maybe we still have to sit down and make a compromise because I'm hoping you'll hear my opposite point of view. But there's much more willingness when we can meet on some kind of playing field where the goal is a win-win, that we end up out of the conversation or the disagreement where we're both getting something of what we want. And it may be a specific agreement around a specific behavior, or it may be that what we really want is to come back together and feel like friends and feel like we could work together.
Well, let me ask you, how do we how do we facilitate deep listening at the national level
Yeah,
if we are seeing America as a family
right.
and you've given the example of a couple going to therapy, but how do you do it amongst 300 million people? And I ask this in this context. It seems that the system, the way things have just evolved, there's built in now this anti deep listening mechanism where the media and the way internet advertising and social media work, there's a drive to get people to hate each other because of clickbait, because it makes money, okay, for certain entities. And the more people are sucked into their bubbles because of the algorithms where they're fed the same kind of ideas that are reinforced over and over and over again, I don't I don't have, I guess, I don't have much hope on how we could escape that when the system seems to just, with these little mobile devices, these mobile phones. I don't see how we can go from the system where we're all at each other's throats and we do see the world in black and white terms, us
Right,
versus them, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm not listening to you. How do
right.
we go from that to deep listening at a national scale?
Well, there's no easy answer to that question. If I had an easy answer, I'd be a million billionaire right now, right? And I'd be really happy if I had a one size fits all answer because, of course, that's what I would love to see more of. Um, but I think, there's a couple of things. I think, and the two big things are, I think we really need a different kind of education. I think we need to really understand the high cost of what we're doing because people are really suffering. Whether they themselves are the targets of discrimination or unjust policy um, or blame, whether they're the actual targets and they're suffering from that kind of rejection and mistreatment in our culture, or that we're just feeling powerless as we witness the big players in this dance of power, seeking to win out at all costs without listening to one another. Because I think the average American today, as you said, is feeling the high cost of that kind of tension and fear about what the outcome's going to be, and is it going to erupt in more violence or more hatred. So we all suffer from that. And one of the beauties of psychotherapy is that it's I probably said this last time we spoke, I don't remember, but the main thing that brings people to therapy is pain. It's their unresolved human relations that bring them to therapy. Even if they're coming to therapy because they're struggling with addiction or they can't get a good job or they're just really not able to express their creativity or get along with their kids and they're just coming by themselves, they're still dealing with their early conditioning. What set them up to feel so depressed or so anxious or so angry or so unable to relate to others in a healthy way? So we're always dealing with our conditioning that we got from other people. And the conditioning that brings people to therapy is the painful conditioning, the hurtful messages they got, the abuse they might have suffered, the rejection or alienation they might have gone through. And so what my hope is for our country, and it's even greater now that the election has happened, is that we can feel that pain, not the way we usually do, which is like, who do we blame for it? But that we can feel it as a call to what do we actually need to do to heal? Because our greatest pain comes from our most dysfunctional human relations. And that's what I would like to educate people. Our greatest pain doesn't come from somebody over there. I mean, obviously, there might be somebody over there who's hurting us, but our greatest pain comes from dysfunctional human relations. So, how do we heal them on a national level the way we would seek to heal them in a family?
Mm.
And, one of the first things that we do, and I spend a lot of time in my book talking about what are the healing principles that we could take out of our office and out of our family, just from our family learning and bring to our national conversation. And one of them is, what we've been talking about which is how do we help people sit down and actually realize that it's to their advantage to work things out,
Yeah.
because when we really just try to overpower other people, we create people who are symptomatic. When people are denied a voice or they're hated for the color of their skin or their gender or for any other reason, or they're mistreated or they're the subjects of injustice, blatant injustice, they're going to be symptomatic. And then they're going to be symptomatic in the body of America, which is exactly what we see. So many people who are failing to thrive, who commit crimes, who become addicts, who don't take adequate care of their children, and the list who commit mass murders. So we're creating symptoms and symptom bearers, and we have to realize that
Mm.
because that's the pain we need to feel. What we're doing is hurting other people, and it's going to come back to bite us, and it already is.
So it's a lot. So we could be fueling, I guess, a resentment epidemic, right? Where people who feel mistreated and judged, or who don't feel like they're getting ahead, will grow resentment, and that resentment will then play out in uh, trying to blame somebody else for their pain or their suffering, which then creates its own resentment. This is a cycle that
Exactly.
we can't really get out of. And so, what then? Who then are responsible? Would it be the leaders? Is it the leaders of the political system? Would it be best to just say, listen, the leaders need to get themselves in order so that they can be an example for the rest of us? That's what I would be leaning toward, I guess, especially when it comes to partisanship and the political parties, because it seems to me, anytime I turn on the news, the one political party is going to blame the other for all the world's ailments, all
Right.
the problems in the country, every single issue that we're going through.
Right.
There's the us versus them mentality. Well, give me power. It's because they. And I think I used the word demonization last time, right? That demonization then becomes a natural,
Right.
excuse that we'll start trying to do. Like, I have one example: the topic of immigration, right? That topic just by itself can produce so much passion. I mean, I'm an immigrant myself. I came to the U.S. when I was a kid, and so I have mixed feelings, on the topic. In other words, it's not black and white. We're a nation of immigrants, but at the same time, we got to have rule of law. So it's a lot of it's a few different things all bunched up together. But it can become such a polarizing point to where the attacks and the demonization, the demagoguery begins. It creates just a lot of ugliness that
Hmm.
promotes more resentment.
Right.
And I foresee that that's going to become a pretty big um, deal that might tear us apart in the next few years because of the promised mass deportation thing that's on the
Right.
radar. And I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Just because that's going to now be another friction point that we're going to have to deal with as a country. So how about that example? What can we do to learn to communicate with each other and address that difference on that topic, for example?
Well, the bottom line, I think, for healthy communication, the bottom line, besides that we agree to nonviolence, because there's no healthy communication with a threat of violence or
Yeah.
acts of violence. You can't work anything out in an arena where people are frightened and threatened and hurt. You can't, because all you do is evoke their defenses. Um, so in addition to that, to some commitment to deal, let's just say, with the immigration problem, with our differences about how it should be dealt, and with the immigration problem itself, if we were to even start with agreeing to deal with it without violence, without overtly just hurting people to get our way, that would be a start. But and I don't have the answer to
I
immigration.
know.
No, it's really complicated.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to talk about the mental health part of that issue that would be the mental health part of any issue that's loaded, where people are very fiery about it, where they disagree, where they want to fight about it. Um, so what I'm going to say could apply to any issue. I don't have the answer to immigration, but I think we have the bottom line, besides nonviolence, to any kind of real possibility of conflict resolution, is that I agree to take responsibility for myself and I stop pointing the finger at other people. That is the bottom line. And in the best psychotherapy, that's what we help people do, not with shame and blame, not by saying like what's your part in this, not like that, but that I actually look at myself and learned how to become responsible for how am I communicating? What did I do that is contributing to the problem that I have with you? Not that I'm going to just take all the responsibility if I feel that you have a part in it, but what could I do differently that would be more in line with healing this? Could I talk to you with more respect? Could I listen to you with a more openness? Could I validate something in what you're saying the way I want you to validate me? But the other, and so that's it. Those are, it's like, because that's what happens in a couple, right? If a couple just keeps pointing their fingers at each other, they get nowhere. And in
Yep.
fact, the fighting usually escalates. But what turns it around is if I can sit down and say, you know what? I really didn't talk to you very nicely when I was reacting to what you said, and I could speak to you with more respect. Will you tell me again what it is you really wanted me to understand? I'm really trying to listen. This is me taking responsibility for my behavior, even if I don't agree with you. Okay. The other thing, and I mean, if we could see this in Congress, it would be a whole new world. If people were really, if there was trained facilitation and people were role modeling for the country,
Yep.
what it looks like when you have deep divides to actually try to bridge the gap. But the other part that's a little harder to embrace on a personal level and on a national level would be to look at what responsibility we have for the immigration crisis. What countries have we impacted in a negative way that have toppled their governments or created suffering in those countries that have produced some of the immigration waves of immigration that we see? It's much harder to do that. It's easier to blame other people than to take responsibility for ourselves. We have not always acted in good faith around the world by any means. That's a very mild way of putting it. We've created a lot of suffering that has produced a lot of the waves of immigration. And where are we willing as a nation to take responsibility for that? And what would it even look like? I don't know, but it would start by acknowledging it, just like it would start by me and my relationship saying, that thing I said to you was really hurtful and I'm sorry. What can I do to make it right now?
Yep. Well, all good. So personal responsibility and helping take ownership of our part in it. And I
Right.
was thinking what you typically hear from both sides on that issue of immigration would be one side is accusing the other of, being xenophobic and not wanting to let people come in. The other side is going to accuse of you just want an invasion. And so when we start off finger pointing by accusing, nefarious motives to the other side, well, of course that's going to then inflame tensions
Right.
because there's both sides who may have valid points, but the way we go about having the discourse is a complete mess that just blows it up even more.
And what
So,
last words that you said are really the pivotal point. We're going to have disagreement.
yeah,
It's just in the nature of being human beings. We're always going to have disagreement. It's the way we go about resolving it that makes all the difference. And
correct.
that's what we can learn. We can learn how to go about resolving our differences in a way that doesn't incite war, that doesn't incite hatred, and that actually has a possibility of some kind of resolution.
Correct. Well, awesome. So just a couple minutes left. So as we wrap up, now that we are past November 5th, 2024, election's over, and hopefully we don't have to deal with this kind of an election, again for a very long time. Because I'm telling you, these elections are the campaigning is just way too long. We need to have shorter elections so that we don't have to be each other's throats for so
Right,
long.
right.
But what advice then would you have for our leaders, for the new president-elect, for our Congress, we're all starting over now. It's all kind of a clean, fresh slate. But
Hmm.
do you fear that it's gonna get better or worse? Any predictions? But you're the psychotherapist, what is your advice, your takeaway, bottom line?
Well, I think one of the challenges we face now with one party controlling all three arms of the government is a big challenge. No matter which party it was, it happens to be one party, but even no matter which party it might have been, um, I think one of the biggest challenges is, will we let there be more than one voice at the table? Or will the majority drown out any alternative point of view? And I think that's probably the biggest challenge we face, because in a healthy family, even though the parents have a different position than the children, um, in a healthy family, there's room for everyone to have a voice. Everyone may not get their way all the time because that's just the nature of being in a group of people, but there's room for everybody to have safety around expressing their needs, their wants, their opinions, and their values. And my hope would be that we still allow more than one voice to be heard, even. But I think the challenge is greater. I honestly think the challenge is greater.
All right. Well, Phyllis Levitt, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate the talk. And people who are interested can definitely get your book, America in Therapy, so they can learn more about these conflict resolution approaches to solving problems so that we're not at each other's throats, but trying to make peace and building bridges and having a better country and better families. All right, guys. Until next time, check out everything on lmipodcast.com and on the YouTube channel. Until next time, take care. Mac Pierre-Louis.